Can I first of all thank the organisers for inviting me to give this work in progress paper. I've recently read a book, I don't know if you have too, A Street Cat Named Bob, how a stray cat finds the ghosted author James Bowen, a former heroin addict and big issue seller, and through the cat's intervention the man turns his life around. It's a sort of pilgrim's progress for the 21st century with the cat as a saviour. And I start with this to illustrate the problem we have in writing animal-human history. Of course, animals do not write history, and their past actions are largely filtered through human narratives. So here, where is Bob in all of this? As Erica Fudge has argued, as access to animals in the past is through humans, then we never look at the animals, only ever at the representation of the animals by humans. The difficulty then can be, she continues, that animals themselves disappear, abandoned in favour of the purely textual. So thinking as a historian about feline-human relationships, one needs to look at the historical and social context over time, while bearing in mind the problem of considering whether cats and humans did actually change in relationship to each other, or whether it's simply about the relationship being written about in a different way. Certainly the way that cats are described does change from the turn of the 19th, 20th century to the end of the war. But I also suggest that there are traces in extant material to indicate that there is some actual change taking place. 19th century accounts of cats suggests that they are potentially wild even when kept as companions, not entirely tamed or to be trusted according to the RSPCA. They're simultaneously depicted as representing domesticity, as in this Worcester porcelain, but also as wild creatures who need to be tamed to do this, even when apparently well bred, as this illustration of 1898 indicates in its caption. This concept of wildness and domesticity is particularly evident in various accounts of cats' behaviour at night, where yowling outside is seen both as a serious problem and as wildness to be tamed by keeping the cat in the house at night. And particularly a cause of concern here that cats are behaving actually in groups. And groups are themselves seen as abnormal and often cited in accounts of cats abandoned, particularly from middle-class homes in London squares when houses are shut up during the summer months. And this was called by the RSPCA the late 19th century the cat starvation season. The groups of abandoned cats were seen to be threatening and hostile precisely because of being in a group and asking for food, and this continues into the 1930s. Even in an image showing a cat's home, the number of cats photographed are in a sense seen to be an abnormal gathering. Yet despite this critique of animals in groups, we can also see, as the Algers have more recently analysed, that cats in the past did relate to each other in groups rather than simply acting as individuals. And arguably, some of these images were seen worthy of capturing, as they are not the norm of a relationship of cats to humans but to each other. This cat-to-cat relationship is antithetical to the way that cats were and are seen to perform a particular function in relation to humans. This relationship can be seen as central, at least to humans, and this role changes over time. In breeds of cats, one key feature of function is the appearance of fur, and we can concur from that cats were then bred for fur. A second function, particularly in relation to cats not bred for their appearance, and fur is a utilitarian one in relation to killing mice and rats. That there is an extensive literature on manuals on whether this is natural or learned behaviour for cats to do this suggests, if nothing else, that cats did not necessarily kill rats and mice. And there was a distinction made here too between cats in a house, though not necessarily called pets, and those that were called warehouse or office cats, as opposed to the term feral cats. And the home-based relationship was based around training of some sort and of the cat doing. But there are different approaches to how a cat was trained to kill through withdrawal or not of food. Now, while training to kill is seen as possible, training to walk in particular routes is not. As the work of 1898 described it, it has been observed of the whole race that though they will often obey the order come, they absolutely refuse to entertain the command go. And interestingly, looking for sort of absences in pet manuals, one of the things I've looked for and cannot find is the suggestion that cats were put on leads to take them for walks, indicating, it seems, that this independence is seen as an integral part of the feline makeup, and hence the criticism of cats in groups, although they are seen on leads in particular cat shows. Now, although sharing human space, a cat was not necessarily seen as an integral part of familial concerns, and I would suggest a different human-animal relationship existed, certainly to now. A cat was being given house room in return for services rendered, and this relationship was not dissimilar to that of a master and servant, with the power clearly residing in the human running the family. And there are good examples of this in a mass observation directive of summer 2009, in which contributors talk back to their relationship with cats in the 1920s and 1930s. As one man put it, "I suppose I thought of these cats as pets, but I have no memory of stroking or fussing them. Indeed, I must have appreciated at even that early age that they were, as you might say, on the payroll and had to earn their keep, with no time for friendly overtures." As another one put it, "Cats were a wilder lot than dogs, totally foolhardy to stroke an unknown cat, not that you'd even think of it. What with their mangy coats, sharp claws and untamed manners, they weren't a cuddly lot." Now, one of the difficulties in analysing cat behaviour as opposed to the human-feline relationship in the early 20th century is the paucity of veterinary literature. And I think these are potentially important texts, since the interest in cats is not primarily based on a cleansing function or an emotional relationship. Introducing his Index of Cat and Dog Diagnoses in 1939, experienced veterinary surgeon W. Hamilton Kirk commented on the lack of attention to cats and dogs during his own training, and in drafting his textbook, he had to draw on cases brought to the Royal Veterinary College Clinic. Often, for example, abdominal conditions were not recognised, and there doesn't seem to be a connection made between what the cat ate, which is very dubious, and her digestive problems. And Kirk cites, for example, that cats were often alleged to have been poisoned when in fact they were suffering from similar symptoms to feline enteritis. So I've tried to map out some of these themes in the first part of the 20th century. Now, the 1939 war, I argue, and I'm leaving aside for the moment the impact of the cat and dog massacre at the start of the war, when 400,000 animals were killed in 4 days. But apart from that, which clearly was important, the war itself, I suggest, was a key moment, not just for humans, but animals alike. It brought about different physical relationships, and also because of the nature of warfare, gave way to more written and oral accounts that included non-human animals in war-induced routines. It brought, for example, a shift in the sharing of space. Rather than routinely turning cats out at night, they started to be kept in. Cats, in turn, tended to be more house-oriented. Initially, some cats were disoriented by the blackout, having used the reflection of lighted rooms in a garden, for example, to understand that this was a sign that the family was in, and therefore being able to stay out because they could come in later. As this cat's keeper explained, since then, with the blackout, he's stayed at home more than usual and has shown every symptom of puzzlement and disquiet. Being more present in the home also meant that cats and dogs would shelter together with their keepers, often ensuring that the humans, when they had external shelters, went to the shelter speedily due to the acute hearing of the animals. As the National Airway Precautions Animal Committee reported in 1941, the remarkable paucity of casualties among small animals can in some measure be accounted for by their acute sense of hearing and the rapidity with which they take cover, selecting from unerring instinct sheltered places from which they emerge free from harm. And Julian Huxley, Secretary to the Zoological Society, endorsed this observation. He noted that cats soon learnt on hearing an alert that there was danger from above, and accordingly they would run to cellars, under chairs. And he noticed that their animals' acute hearing meant that in saving themselves they were also alerting humans. Whereas the state of fur was previously deemed to be important, now it was a sense of hearing. And I don't necessarily read this as mere human shifting, but what was being heard by cats. Loud sounds not normally heard other than, say, during fireworks. The specific context of the war ensured a particular sensory skill was highlighted and used to their own benefit and that of humans. It's because of this sense of hearing that benefits cats themselves and humans that it starts to get noticed. Animals also played a role in directing rescuers to track people or even a dog, and being around the house more meant different aspects of their behaviour changed by war circumstances and were noticed. We're told by Fryn, Tennyson Jesse, for example, about the war precautions of placing buckets of sand on every landing. As Fryn writes, after a few weeks, we discovered the kitten misunderstood the purpose of these, so we emptied them again. Now they are refilled and have a piece of cardboard laid over the top, so the kitten can't make the same mistake. Besides, anyway, now it prefers ruining my best plants. Cats were also noticed as survivors on bombardment alongside humans. Diarist over there on the left. Diarist Gladys Cox, for example, describes the staff at the local branch of the Grocers Cullens and the demolition men and the customers looking for out for the mum of Bob, her own cat, in another branch of the Grocers that had been bombed. She declares in March 44, Bob's mother alive. Demolition workers found her as they dug away debris in the shop and carried her in a sack to the Finchley Road Cullens. When I saw her this morning, days without food, she's very thin, but seems none the worst. Now, this reaction is very different to that predicted by the Cats Protection League, who thought that rescue workers would ignore animals. And in practice, rescue parties seem to have been far more sympathetic than the Cats Protection League suggested. And they'd said, wherever you are and whatever happens to you, you'll be rescued before long, and rescue parties will not trouble over animals. Now, animals certainly played their role in succouring humans emotionally through the war. As Gladys Cox notes of Bob, her tabby cat, he was our constant companion and consolation in all our wartime trials. Significantly too, veterinarians and zoologists started to change their attitude to cats, seeing cats as animals worthy of professional study. And this was partly attributed to the role of animal charities in the cities who cared for animals rather than the vets, and dominating the the air raid precaution work that was there rather than vets. There was, for example, an important study published in the Journal of Animal Ecology in 1944, one of the first on cat ownership. But cats also received status as war heroes. As Francis Partridge wrote in March 1942, will anyone believe in 20 years' time that the wireless makes pronouncements about cats doing work of national importance? And then there's another example here of Faith the cat, and this is a cat that stands alone and looks after her kittens on a night of very bad bombing. It's in a church near St Paul's Cathedral, and this cat very much fits with this idea of the myth of the Blitz and we can take it and London standing alone. Now, the veterinary profession then during the war, or at the end of the war, started to refocus its attention on the care of animals such as cats, hitherto neglected, particularly as part of the urban rather than the rural environment. Reg Woolridge, then president of the National Veterinary Medical Association, set up the Veterinary Education Trust in 1942. And in due course, this would lead to the British Small Animal Veterinary Association, still functioning today. In conclusion, the war brought greater human attention to where cats physically were, and their use not just in killing mice, but in alerting humans to danger. Although killed in their hundreds of thousands at the start of the war, their particular behaviour started to be observed more closely. James Serpell has argued humans use animals as alternative sources of social support and benefit emotionally and physically from this. But also, as Mark Beckhoff suggests, if animals didn't show their feelings, it's unlikely people would bond with them. The changed circumstances affecting both meant that humans saw cats differently and, it seems, responded in many instances differently. Cats, too, became more home-oriented and, it seems, changed in their orientation to humans in turn. Thank you.